Well, joining me now in studio to talk about the SAPS protocol when dealing with violent protests is Vuyisile Ngesi. He is Head of Communication at the SAPS. It's great to have you in studio this morning. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Firstly, let's just begin. I mean, if you are caught up in a situation where there are protests taking place, how should you expect the police to respond? What is the protocol in terms of the SAPS?
Thank you very much for affording us this opportunity. One, it's a right for everybody to be part of a protest, but on the other hand, it's a right for everybody not to be part of a protest, whatever the nature of the protest is. And us as the police are there to ensure that there is public order during protest. And if protesters and go about their business in a peaceful and orderly manner, you won't find any incident whatsoever, because us as police will just be there to monitor the situation, to ensure that everybody is safe, the protesters and non-protesters, also to guarantee the protection of both public and private property. But in an instance where a protest turns violent and threatens the safety and security of the next person who might not necessarily be part of that protest, or any property, movable or not, then the police will act accordingly as prescribed in the law.
When do police then use tear gas, stun grenades, rubber bullets, and what is the protocol that they must follow before using or employing that capacity?
Yes, normally what will happen is that depending on the nature of the protest and the gathering at that particular moment, the police would first have to engage with the protesters or whoever is the lead person amongst the protesting crowd. Engage with that person and also warn them of consequences of not working within the ambit of the law. To say, if you cross this boundary, for example, this will be the repercussions. And you find in most instances that it falls on deaf ears. And instead, like we've seen recently, police would be pelted with stones and other objects like bottles and bricks. And that's when now you employ those tactics, you know, stun grenade, rubber bullets, and so on. And the use of tear gas is never one of our options. We employ strictly stun grenades and rubber bullets.
But tear gas is often used in violent protests.
When it's extreme, but it's not advisable, and it's in very rare instances, Cathy, that we use it. It's very rare. You can actually go back and check. You'll realize that instead the smoke you see comes from the flare that comes from when you shoot a stun grenade.
Okay, I've covered a number of violent service delivery protests, and police have used tear gas in almost every one of those protests I've covered.
It hasn't happened in a long time. Maybe during your time as a journalist.
I'm still in my time as a
field reporter. It happened there.
Okay, let's talk about the issue of the firing of rubber bullets or even stun grenades. There are supposed to be some kind of warnings into the crowd. I mean, we've heard of recommendations where a loudspeaker is supposed to be used, especially during violent protests. One hardly ever sees this.
But in most instances, Cathy, I can tell you, our public order policing commanders on the ground, in their interaction they know the protocol, they know what should happen. They are interacting with protesters, especially the leadership within the protesting group. For example, at one of the universities in Grahamstown at Rhodes, the situation that supposedly got out of control happened because there was interaction first with the protesters. We told them this is not supposed to happen due to the fact that there's a court order that prevents you from disrupting academic programs. You know, there's that interaction, loudspeaker, depending on the circumstance. But we ensure that there is that interaction, because we can't just out of no provocation embark on a program where we start firing stun grenades and rubber bullets towards protesters.
And speaking on the measure that police use, I mean, these visuals that we're watching are from Wits University of the two students that were taken. We're also, of course, showing you visuals of what happened at Rhodes University.
Yes.
A lot of people are saying that the police are simply too heavy-handed when dealing with these protesters. Are you surprised when you hear comments like that?
No, you see, the people must know that there's a very thin line between what they might term heavy-handedness and upholding the rule of law. The law allows us to actually subdue any suspect who under arrest is resisting arrest. So if a person is resisting arrest, the police would have to come up with measures to subdue that person, to bring him or her into custody.
But what happens if the arrest is wrongful? You know, like these two young students.
That's for a court of law to decide on the wrongfulness of the arrest or not. It's not for a police officer on the ground to do that. Therefore, I'm saying if a suspect in any form of activity that we might deem to be criminal, if that person resists arrest, there's measures that you will bring into place to subdue the person, to bring that person into custody. As to whether the wrongfulness or the rightfulness of the arrest is there or not, it's not for us as the police to determine. It will be determined by a court of law.
How do police decide who to arrest during a protest? Because there's so many people who, if they're charging towards a specific area, and not all of them are carrying stones or necessarily making sure or are threatening the police per se. So how do you decide who gets to be arrested?
You see, what will normally happen is that you get a crowd, let me say a crowd of 30 people are blockading the entrance to Empire Road. You have identified your targets. These are the people there. You can see them. These 30 students are blocking the entrance to Wits University. And once you start firing stun grenades, they scatter in all directions. But you still can see who they are. And you'll find that instead of your target was 30, but you ended up arresting about 15, 12. But that group would be from the group that you had seen that these are the main instigators in most of the instances. It's not that we'll be arresting people randomly. You understand? We also there. We are able to monitor what's happening. We are able to monitor who's an instigator in that particular crowd.
And what qualifies one to be an instigator?
The same person who knows that, one, you are not supposed to be gathering there without a permit in terms of the regulations of Gatherings Act of 1996, 205 of 1996. You know that you're not supposed to be in that gathering. It's a legal gathering. You are participating in an illegal march. Already there you are violating the law.
So basically you have the power to arrest anyone that is part of an illegal protest in this country?
Yes, the law allows us.
That's very interesting.
Yes.
And what do you do from there on? I mean, once the arrests have been effected?
Once the arrests have been effected, they will be brought before a court of law within the stipulated time, and the decision will, and then we'll also advise the public prosecutor at that time to say these people have been charged for example, public violence, malicious damage to property, gathering illegally, all those laws that have to deal, all those charges that will emanate from that activity. Then the decision to prosecute or not will lie with the public prosecutor. For example, we've seen instances at universities around the country where other students have been released unconditionally. It's a decision of a public prosecutor. Others have been remanded in custody, like at the UK's ZN, for example. Others have been released on warning to appear again in court, like yesterday, the ones that appeared in Grahamstown have been released on warning to appear again in court today. But also not to interfere with any witnesses or disrupt academic programs on campus. So it varies. The decision doesn't lie with the police.
Do you find that it's difficult to get into negotiations with the crowd, especially when there isn't a clear leader? And it's what we've seen with a lot of these protests. It's hard to pinpoint, if there is a specific grouping that is responsible for it, or if it's just mass action by the students. In that case, when you're on the ground, who are the police then trying to negotiate with? Because oftentimes it looks like there isn't much time or much room given to that negotiation process.
Yes, it's a difficult and tough balancing act, So most of the time our members on the ground do encounter situations where it's difficult to negotiate because there's no one to negotiate with. And even then, we'll try and request whoever is the leader of that particular grouping to come forward. You know, we've got the loud hailers, we do that. Like recently, I met with never seen before type of violence instead. You know, because the problem is that there's a perception out there that seems, or a narrative that seems to say the police are the enemy of the students, and you are not. We are there to also protect those that are protesting. We need to guarantee their safety also. But if they are interacting with us and confronting us with violent behavior and violent approach, it becomes difficult for us as the police also to maintain public order. Because our clarion call is one. We are saying everybody's got the right to protest. But let it be done in a peaceful, orderly manner. Secondly, let the protest not infringe upon the rights of those that don't want to protest.
What has happened to the recommendations by the Marikana Commission when it comes to the issue of equipping and skilling police in terms of dealing with public order? Because some of these visuals, many people looking at them, commenting, saying that, well, you know, we could see another Marikana, because sometimes it looks like police simply don't know what to do and that they're very reactionary in the moment. So what has become of those recommendations?
Cathy, you'll remember that, and I think we'll agree, me and you, that implementation of the recommendations of such a nature is not something you do overnight. It's not an event, it's a process. And you don't just wake up and say, yesterday Judge Falam said this is what must happen in regard to public order policing. You need to put structures, you need to put systems, you need to put people in place to ensure that in the long term, you are able to see the fruits of those particular recommendations. And what has happened is that our members in public order policing are continuously now going on training, retraining, refresher courses to be able to handle public protest better. But in addition also, the Minister of Police has put in a variety of teams of experts, you know, from various fields of within the security sector, but also beyond the security sector. These experts are there to advise so that 10 years, 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now, we'll be able to see the fruits of that those particular teams or panels of experts. So it's an ongoing process. But you must remember that as this process is ongoing, protests are not going to wait for the process to come to an end. That's why within that process, we continue to take our members on retraining, recapacitating, but also we are going on full recruitment in terms of new members coming into the police. So because you must remember the police were just under 200,000 members. We had about 140,000 on the feet on the ground, and not all of that 140,000 are part of public order policing. And we are talking of that number of people policing a population of, according to the last census, about over 52 million. So just check the ratio of one police officer to how many people per police officer in the country. And I think credit must be given where it's due. The South African Police Service is doing its very best to ensure that we handle this protest properly. The only thing is that people must behave in an orderly and peaceful manner. You won't see any reaction from the police. All right, that's how I'm going to leave it with you for this morning. Thank you so much for coming into studio. Vuyisile Ngesi, he is Head of Communication at the SAPS